22. It tasted like cheap champagne and the bitter realization that my life was about to be dictated by a different set of rules. I'd clutched my business administration degree, the parchment a shield against the wave of anxiety threatening to drown me. College was my safety net, my escape. Now it was gone. Grandma's old apartment, technically Dad's now, felt like a ticking clock. Rent. The word echoed in my head, a constant, low-level hum of impending doom. I'd been coasting, paying only the utilities with my earnings from Luigi's. The smell of garlic and desperation clung to my clothes. Waiting tables was soul-crushing. The thankless smiles plastered on my face a constant betrayal of the exhaustion gnawing at my bones. But it paid the bills. Barely. The graduation dinner was a carefully orchestrated facade. Mom, with her signature blend of overbearing love and subtle manipulation, had outdone herself. Lasagna, garlic bread, tiramisu, enough food to feed an army of graduates. My younger sister, Emily, all 17 years of privileged innocence, kept chirping about how she'd miss my homework help. 17 and still blissfully unaware of the real world, shielded by our parents' unwavering devotion. Aunt Sarah, Uncle Bob, the cousins, the usual cast of family extras rehashing their own college tales, the forced laughter, the hollow congratulations. I wanted to scream. Couldn't they see the fear shimmering beneath my carefully applied makeup? Couldn't they feel the seismic shift about to rock my life? But then, the relatives left. The air thickened. The polite smiles vanished, replaced by the uncomfortable silence that always preceded bad news. Mom cleared her throat, that familiar, dreaded sound that had haunted my childhood. My stomach clenched. "Tamara, honey," she started, her voice suddenly too sweet, too formal. "Now that you've graduated, we need to discuss the apartment situation." The blood drained from my face. The world seemed to tilt. I set down my coffee cup, the ceramic making a sharp clink against the saucer, amplified in the suddenly oppressive silence. "What? What about it?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. Mom's eyes hardened slightly. "Well, if you want to continue living there, you'll need to start paying rent." The words hit me like a physical blow. Rent. On this day? After all the sacrifices, the late nights, the sheer willpower it took to drag myself through 4 years of relentless pressure, this was their congratulations? Dad sat there, a statue of indifference, pretending to be engrossed in his coffee. Emily, glued to her phone, was a vulture in disguise, watching the scene unfold with morbid curiosity. I see, I stammered, my hand trembling as I reached for my water glass. Mom launched into a detailed explanation, her voice devoid of warmth. "It will be below market rate, a family discount," she said with a tight, brittle smile, "but still substantial." Substantial. The word echoed in my head, translating to a crushing weight of responsibility. Luigi's wasn't going to cut it. I needed a real job. Fast. "I understand," I said, my voice flat. What else could I say? They were right, in a twisted way. I wasn't a student anymore. I was an adult, and adults paid their way. But the timing, the sheer callousness, it felt like a deliberate attempt to deflate my joy, to remind me that I was still beholden to them. That night, staring at the cracked ceiling of my childhood bedroom, the reality crashed down on me. The weight of expectations, the looming threat of financial ruin, the suffocating feeling of being trapped. I scrolled through endless job postings, trying to ignore the burning resentment that threatened to consume me. I would survive. I had to, but a part of me, a small, vulnerable part, felt utterly and completely betrayed. The next year was a blur, a relentless cycle of work, rent payments, and the slow, agonizing process of becoming an adult. I landed a job at a marketing firm, nothing glamorous, but it was a start. Junior account coordinator. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to cover the rent, the utilities, and a sliver of savings each month. Every month, on the dot, the money was transferred to Mom's account. I even added a little extra for utilities, even though she never explicitly asked. A pathetic attempt to prove myself, to show them I could handle it. Maybe, deep down, I was still seeking their approval, desperate to erase the perceived failure of needing their help. Emily would visit occasionally, her motives transparent. She needed help with college applications, wanted to raid my closet. Senior year! I could see her changing, becoming more secretive, more entitled. Our sisterly bond, once a source of comfort, had withered into a transactional exchange. I was a resource, a tool to be used and discarded. And then there was Jason. He was her boyfriend, a year older, working some dead-end job at the mall. The first time she brought him over, a red flag immediately went up. He was slick, all surface charm and zero substance. He talked about getting rich quick, about how things would magically fall into place. He expected to be taken care of. I saw the way he looked at my apartment, at my things. An assessment, a calculation. He saw potential, a free ride. He was a parasite, and Emily, blinded by infatuation, was happily offering him a host. Then came the phone call, the one that shattered the illusion of my carefully constructed independence. "Tamara, you need to come over right away." Mom's voice was strained, tight with barely suppressed panic. "It's important." I assumed it was Emily. College applications, scholarship options. Maybe they needed me to mediate some argument. I couldn't have been more wrong. The atmosphere at my parents' house was suffocating. Mom and Dad, rigid and pale, sat on the couch. Emily, perched in an armchair, wore an expression that bordered on smug. "Sit down, Tamara," Dad said, his voice gravelly. He looked older, defeated. I sat on the edge of the ottoman, my heart pounding. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. "Emily is pregnant," Mom announced, the words devoid of any emotion. Pregnant! My 18-year-old sister. Pregnant by the mall rat boyfriend. I stared at Emily, trying to reconcile the image of the giggling teenager with the reality of impending motherhood. Mom's hands twisted in her lap, a telltale sign of her anxiety. "There's something else we need to discuss." She straightened her back, smoothing her skirt, preparing for the final blow. "Emily and Jason will need a place to live. They'll be moving into the apartment." The air rushed out of my lungs. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the ottoman, struggling to stay upright. "Excuse me? You'll need to move out," Mom stated, as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "Emily and Jason need somewhere to start their family. It's the perfect solution, really. The apartment is already furnished, it's in a good neighborhood, and it's close to Jason's parents." I looked at Emily. She was examining her nails, a small, satisfied smirk playing on her lips. No remorse, no apology, just entitlement. And she was wearing my sweater, the one she borrowed last month and never returned. I'll need time to find a new place," I managed. The thought of apartment hunting while working full-time filling me with dread. "Oh, and Tamara," Mom added as an afterthought. "You'll still need to continue paying the rent." I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that shattered the strained silence. I thought it was a joke, a cruel, twisted joke, but their faces were grim, unyielding. "You can't be serious. Your sister and Jason are young," Mom explained, her voice laced with condescension. "They don't have jobs yet, and with the baby coming." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at Emily's stomach. "So, let me get this straight," I interrupted, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "You want me to move out and continue paying rent for an apartment I won't be living in? For them?" Dad finally met my eyes, his expression hardening. "They need our help, Tamara. It's your responsibility as the older sister. Family helps family. My responsibility?" I stood up, my hands shaking. "If they're mature enough to have a baby, they're mature enough to get jobs and support themselves. Has either of them even looked for full-time work?" Emily suddenly burst into tears. Dramatic, crocodile tears. I'm going to be a mother. Don't you care about your niece or nephew? You're being very ungrateful, Mom said, her voice like ice. After everything we've done for you, ungrateful? I've been paying rent for the past year. I've been working since college. And now you want me to support two perfectly capable adults who got themselves into this situation. We aren't asking you to support us forever, Mom pleaded. Just until we get on our feet. Yeah, right, I scoffed. And when is that going to happen? You're not working now because you're pregnant. What about after the baby is born? I'll figure something out, Emily said vaguely. I shook my head. I'm not paying a single cent for them. If you want to enable this, that's your choice. But count me out. I walked out, their shouts of ungrateful and selfish ringing in my ears. The front door slammed behind me, a final, resounding declaration of my banishment. I was alone. I didn't wait a week. That very night, fueled by anger and hurt, I started packing. Tears streamed down my face as I sorted through 4 years of memories, each item a reminder of my shattered dreams. Fortunately, I had savings. All those extra hours at work, the sacrifices I'd made, were finally going to pay off. I'd been putting aside money for a rainy day, and apparently, the storm had arrived. I found a small studio apartment across town and signed the lease the next day. It wasn't much. The kitchen was tiny, the bathroom was outdated, and the commute would be a nightmare. But it was mine. As I packed, I made a detailed inventory, meticulously categorizing everything. Furniture provided by my parents stayed behind. The old couch from their basement, the dining table that had belonged to Grandma, the bookshelf Dad had assembled. But the books that filled it, the clothes in the closet, the kitchen appliances, those were mine. My coffee maker, a splurge after my first bonus. My laptop, bought with 3 months of tips from Luigi's. My bed, purchased piece by piece, frame, mattress, and bedding. Over my first 6 months of full-time work, all the things I'd earned, the symbols of my independence, went into boxes. It took 2 days. My boss, Sarah, was understanding when I asked for a personal day, although I didn't explain the full story. When I was done, I drove past my parents' house and slipped the apartment key under the door. No note! What was there to say? A week later, my phone exploded. Mom was calling, her voice shrill with rage. What have you done to the apartment? She demanded. It's empty. I only took what was mine, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. I bought those things with my own money. Maybe Emily and Jason can try doing the same. You selfish little. The string of expletives that followed would have made a sailor blush. I'd never heard my mother use such language before. I hung up. That night, sitting on my bare mattress in my new, empty apartment, I cried. I cried for the family I thought I had, for the sister who'd become a stranger, for the parents who'd chosen to enable her instead of supporting me. But mostly, I cried for myself, for the naive girl who thought that working hard and doing the right thing would be enough. It's amazing how quickly life can change. In just 1 year, I went from being the good daughter to the family outcast. I threw myself into work with a ferocity that surprised even me. I had to prove myself. Sarah, my boss, noticed. She started giving me more responsibilities. When a major client needed someone to handle a social media crisis at 2 a.m., I volunteered. When the office needed someone to come in on weekends to prepare for a big pitch, I was there. Work became my sanctuary, the one place where effort and merit actually mattered. Soon, I was leading my own projects. The promotion came with a raise, enough to start looking for a better apartment. My tiny studio didn't feel so cramped anymore, but I had begun to dream bigger. I opened a savings account, specifically for a down payment on my own place. Someday, no more renting. Through mutual friends and social media, I heard snippets of information about my family. Emily had given birth to a boy, my nephew. Pictures flooded the internet. A tiny face wrapped in blue, pudgy hands reaching for the camera. First smiles, captured and shared with the world. Emily and Jason were still engaged, playing house in my old apartment, while my parents footed the bill. Then one day, an email popped up in my inbox. From Emily. My heart skipped a beat. "Hey sis," it read as if nothing had happened. "Hope you're doing well. I heard you got a promotion. Congratulations. I'd love for you to come visit and meet your nephew. He's such a precious little angel, and I know you'd love him. I should have known there was a catch." There always was with Emily. The next email arrived before I could even process the first one. A list. Not just any list. A wish list of baby items that made my credit card weep, just looking at it. Designer clothes that cost more than my first month's rent. A stroller that retailed higher than my laptop. Premium toys that probably cost more than Jason made in a month. I stared at my screen, wondering if it was a joke. After everything, after a year of silence, this was how she chose to reach out? Not with an apology, not with any acknowledgement of what she'd done, but with a shopping list. "Are you working yet?" I wrote back, ignoring her list completely. Her response came quickly. "Oh, Mom and Dad are taking care of everything. They pay all the bills and give us spending money. Jason and I don't need to work right now. We're focusing on being parents. It's such an important job, you know?" Then came the kicker. "Actually, we're thinking of having more kids soon. Mom and Dad are such supportive. They'll have to keep helping us if we have more babies. And we want a big wedding too. Nothing cheap. Those old, they'll pay for everything." I read Emily's email 3 times, each time feeling more disgusted. My little sister had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who called our parents' names while happily taking their money. Someone who was planning to have more children just to keep the gravy train running. I didn't reply. What could I say? Congratulations on being a manipulative leech. How's the professional gold digging working out for you? Instead, I closed my laptop and tried to forget about it. But the words kept echoing in my head. Those old, they'll pay for everything. Fate, it seemed, had other plans. A few months later, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Moms?" I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Tamara," she said, her voice different. "Tired. Defeated. We need to talk. Can you come over?" Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe a small part of me still hoped for reconciliation. Whatever the reason, I found myself driving to my parents' house that evening. The familiar streets felt strange. The house looked smaller, more worn down. Dad's hair was grayer, Mom's face lined with new wrinkles. Dark circles under their eyes spoke of long hours and sleepless nights. They sat on their familiar couch, but something about their posture spoke of defeat. "We've been taking extra shifts," Dad said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Working overtime to help your sister and Jason." I waited, saying nothing. "We know you're doing well at your job," Mom continued, and I felt my heart sink. This wasn't going to be an apology. This was another demand. "We think it's time you help support your sister too." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh of pure disbelief. "You want me to what?" "Your sister can't work right now," Mom insisted, leaning forward. "She has the baby to take care of. It's a full-time job. What about Jason? He needs to help with the baby too." I looked at them, these people who had raised me, who had taught me about responsibility and hard work, who had pushed me to get good grades and work through college. Now, they sat here making excuses for 2 perfectly capable adults. "Let me get this straight," I said, carefully enunciating each word. "You're working extra shifts to support my sister and her fiancé, who are both perfectly capable of working but choose not to. And now you want me to help enable their laziness too?" Dad's face turned red. "You're being selfish and greedy. If you don't help support your sister," Mom said, her voice shaking, "consider yourself disowned." "You can't disown someone who's already gone," I said quietly. and walked out. The sound of the door closing behind me felt like the final period in a very long, painful sentence. When I got home that night, my apartment felt like a sanctuary. I kicked off my shoes, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down at my computer. My hands were steady as I opened my email and found Emily's message from months ago. The one where she bragged about manipulating our parents, called them names, and outlined her plan to avoid work by having more children. I stared at it, my cursor hovering over the forward button, a betrayal of trust. But then I remembered Emily had betrayed our parents first. Without adding any message, I forwarded the email to Mom. Sometimes, the raw truth is more powerful than any commentary. Mom didn't respond. A week later, my phone rang. It was Aunt Sarah. "You won't believe what happened," she said, her voice thick with gossip. I could picture her sitting in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Your parents kicked Emily out of the apartment." I nearly dropped my coffee. "What?" "Apparently there was a huge fight. Your mom found out Emily's been mocking them behind their backs. They told her and Jason to get out and that they weren't giving them any more money." I listened as Aunt Sarah detailed the confrontation. Emily screamed and cried, pulling out all her usual dramatic tactics. Jason stood there, looking useless. Dad finally put his foot down and told them they had 3 days to leave. According to Aunt Sarah, Mom had been eerily calm, simply saying, "We've been played for fools long enough." I wasn't surprised when my phone lit up with Emily's number. I could predict the conversation. "Tamara," her voice thick with tears, "can we stay with you? Just until we figure things out? Please, we have nowhere else to go." "No," I said, the single word a small victory. "You're just like Mom and Dad," she screamed. "You're all so selfish. We're family." "Family doesn't exploit family," I said quietly, and hung up. Later, I heard that Emily, Jason, and the baby had moved in with his parents. His mother, according to Aunt Sarah, was a no-nonsense woman who believed in tough love. Emily was miserable. Her mother-in-law made her follow a strict schedule, help with housework, and actually parent her child. She had to do laundry, cook meals, and contribute to the household. Emily spent her days complaining. Life has a way of coming full circle. A few weeks ago, on my birthday, I was celebrating with friends at my apartment. Not the tiny studio anymore, but a 2-bedroom place I'd bought. The doorbell rang during dessert. A courier handed me a package. The return address made my heart skip a beat. My parents. Inside was a silver photo frame. I recognized it. It was the kind of thing I'd admired years ago. It came with a card. "We're sorry. We miss you. When you're ready, we'd like to talk." The handwriting was Mom's. Dad had signed it too. I set the frame on my coffee table and stared at it. My friends asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. The frame is still on my coffee table. The card is pinned to my refrigerator. Reminders of what I've lost and what might still be. I haven't called them yet. The hurt is still there. I hear bits and pieces about Emily. She's still living with Jason's parents, still complaining. Part of me hopes she'll grow up. Maybe someday she'll understand that love doesn't mean enabling bad behavior, and that family doesn't mean being a doormat. As for me, I'm doing well. My career is thriving. I have good friends who understand boundaries. I'm learning to set healthy limits. Sometimes I miss the family I thought I had. I am starting to accept that it was never what I imagined it to be. The silver frame sits on my coffee table, a possibility for someday, if they still want the bridge to be rebuilt. I'm focusing on my journey. My apartment is slowly becoming a home. I'm planning a vacation. I'm thinking about getting a dog. Small steps toward building the life I want, not the one others tried to force me into. Weeks turned into months. The silver frame remained a silent sentinel on my coffee table, a constant reminder of the fractured pieces of my past. I'd catch myself staring at it, lost in a swirl of conflicting emotions, anger, resentment, a lingering ache of longing. Did I want to reconcile? Could I ever truly forgive them for choosing Emily's reckless irresponsibility over my hard-earned independence? The dog idea had taken root. I visited shelters, scrolling through endless photos of hopeful, furry faces. A Shih Tzu with a snaggletooth and a perpetually worried expression caught my eye. I named her Peanut. Peanut was a nervous wreck, a little bundle of anxiety wrapped in fur. She whimpered at loud noises, cowered at sudden movements, and clung to me like Velcro. I quickly realized that rescuing her wasn't just about providing a home, it was about healing. I signed us up for obedience classes, patiently coaxing her out of her shell. We went on walks in the park, exposing her to new sights and sounds. Slowly, tentatively, she began to trust me. Her tail started wagging with more enthusiasm. Her worried expression softened, and she started sleeping curled up at the foot of my bed. Peanut's transformation mirrored my own. Just as I was helping her overcome her fears, she was helping me navigate my own. Her unwavering affection, her simple joy in the everyday, reminded me that life was more than just career ambitions and financial security. It was about connection, about finding happiness in the small moments, about learning to love and trust again. One Sunday afternoon, while we were snuggled on the couch, Peanut snoring softly beside me, my phone rang. It was Aunt Sarah. I braced myself for the usual dose of family drama. "Tamara," she said, her voice unusually subdued. "Your dad's been in the hospital." My breath hitched. "What?" "What happened? He had a heart attack. A pretty bad one. They're saying he needs bypass surgery." A wave of guilt washed over me, a cold, sickening tide. I hadn't spoken to my parents in months, hadn't reached out, hadn't even acknowledged their attempt at reconciliation. Now, my dad was in the hospital, his life hanging in the balance. "How is he?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He's stable now, but he's scared. Your mom's a mess, barely holding it together. And Emily, she's there, but..." Aunt Sarah hesitated. "Well, she's being Emily. Complaining about the hospital food, stressing over how this will affect her wedding plans." I closed my eyes, a familiar wave of frustration washing over me. Some things never changed. I should go," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I think you should," Aunt Sarah replied. "He needs you, Tamara." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. The sterile white walls seemed to amplify the hushed whispers and the beeping of machines. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way to Dad's room. Mom was sitting beside his bed, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I entered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Tamara?" she said, her voice barely audible. "Hi, Mom," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. I approached the bed. Dad was lying there, pale and frail, hooked up to monitors and the fourth drips. He looked so much older than I remembered. The strength and vitality that I had always associated with him seemed to have been drained away. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at me, a flicker of recognition in his gaze. "Tamara," he rasped, his voice weak. "Hi, Dad," I said, reaching for his hand. His skin felt thin and papery. He squeezed my hand weakly. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Of course, I came. I'm here for you." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. The tension in the room was palpable. Years of unspoken words and unresolved conflicts hanging in the air between us. "I'm sorry," Mom said, her voice choked with emotion. I looked at her, surprised. "Sorry? For what?" "For everything," she said, her voice breaking. "For taking Emily's side, for putting you out of the apartment, for everything we did. We were wrong, Tamara. So wrong." The dam finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted all the mistakes they had made, the ways they had failed me, the ways they had enabled Emily's selfishness. She admitted that they had been blinded by their desire to protect Emily, to give her everything they thought she deserved. without realizing that they were actually doing her a disservice. "We just wanted her to be happy," she sobbed, "but we ended up making everyone miserable." I squeezed her hand, my own tears flowing freely. "It's okay, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's okay." Dad watched us, his eyes filled with tears. "We love you, Tamara," he whispered. "Both of you." In that moment, in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the fear of the unknown, the walls that had separated us for so long began to crumble. The years of resentment and hurt didn't magically disappear, but a seed of forgiveness was planted, a fragile hope for reconciliation. Dad's surgery was successful, but the recovery was long and arduous. I spent as much time as I could at the hospital, helping Mom care for him. I brought Peanut with me whenever possible, her small, furry presence providing a much-needed dose of comfort and joy. Emily visited occasionally, but her presence was often more disruptive than helpful. She still complained about her wedding plans, about the inconvenience of Dad's illness, about how unfair it all was. She seemed incapable of understanding the gravity of the situation, of putting aside her own selfish desires for even a moment. One afternoon, while I was helping Dad with his physical therapy, Emily burst into the room, her face flushed with anger. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me. I stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about? If you hadn't sent that email to Mom, none of this would have happened. Dad wouldn't be sick, and I wouldn't be stuck dealing with all this." I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. "Are you seriously blaming me for Dad's heart attack? This has nothing to do with me, Emily. This is about your choices, about your behavior, about the way you've treated Mom and Dad. But if you hadn't—" "Enough," Dad interrupted, his voice surprisingly strong. "Emily, that's enough. Tamara is here helping us. You should be thanking her, not blaming her." Emily glared at me, her eyes filled with venom. "Fine," she spat, "but don't expect me to forgive you for this." She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Dad sighed, shaking his head. "I don't know what to do with her," he said, his voice filled with despair. I squeezed his hand. "Just focus on getting better, Dad. Don't worry about Emily. We'll figure it out." But deep down, I knew that figuring out Emily was a problem that I couldn't solve. She had to want to change, to want to grow. And until she did, there was nothing I could do to help her. As Dad recovered, I found myself spending more and more time with Mom. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. We reminisced about my childhood, about the dreams we had for my future, about the mistakes we had made along the way. Slowly, tentatively, we began to rebuild our relationship. The trust that had been shattered was slowly being pieced back together, like a fragile mosaic. I learned to forgive her for her mistakes, to understand her motivations, to see her as a flawed, imperfect human being, just like me. She, in turn, learned to respect my independence, to appreciate my strength, to see me as the woman I had become, not just the daughter she had raised. She admitted that she had always been afraid of losing me, of me growing up and moving away, and that she had unconsciously tried to hold me back, to keep me dependent on her. "I was wrong," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I see that now. I should have supported you, encouraged you to follow your own path, instead of trying to control you." "It's okay, Mom," I said, my voice filled with love. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them." One day, while we were sitting on the porch swing, watching Peanut chase butterflies in the garden, Mom turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so proud of you, Tamara," she said. "You've become such a strong, independent woman. I admire you so much." I smiled, my heart filled with warmth. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "That means a lot to me." The road to healing was long and difficult, but with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient, more at peace. I learned that forgiveness was a process, not a one-time event. It required patience, understanding, and a willingness to let go of the past. And I learned that family, while sometimes messy and complicated, was still worth fighting for. Emily's wedding was fast approaching. I hadn't spoken to her since our argument at the hospital, and I wasn't sure if I would even attend. The thought of spending an entire day pretending to be happy for her, knowing how she truly felt about me, filled me with dread. But Dad insisted. "It would mean a lot to me, Tamara," he said, his voice pleading. "Please, just come for me." I couldn't refuse him. The wedding was everything I expected it to be, extravagant, over the top, and completely focused on Emily. She was radiant in her designer dress, surrounded by her bridesmaids and showered with attention. Jason, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable and out of place. He seemed to be going through the motions, as if he knew that he was just playing a part in Emily's elaborate fantasy. During the reception, Emily approached me, her eyes narrowed. "So, you decided to come after all," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Dad asked me to," I replied, my voice neutral. "Well, don't think this means I've forgiven you," she said, her voice rising. "I still blame you for everything that's happened," I sighed, shaking my head. "Emily, I'm not going to argue with you. This is your wedding day. Just try to enjoy it." "Enjoy it?" she scoffed. "How can I enjoy it when my own sister is trying to ruin everything?" I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my arm. "Just admit it, Tamara," she said, her voice trembling. "You're jealous of me? You're jealous that I'm getting married? That I have a family? That I have everything you want?" I looked at her, pity washing over me. "Emily," I said softly, "I'm not jealous of you. I'm sad for you. You have so much potential, but you're wasting it on chasing after things that don't matter. You're so focused on what you think you want that you can't see what you already have." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I hope you find happiness, Emily," I said, "but I can't help you find it. You have to find it for yourself." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone and defeated. As I drove home that night, I realized that I had finally let go of the last vestige of hope that Emily would ever change. I had tried to help her, to support her, to love her, but she was too consumed by her own selfishness to see the truth. I knew that I couldn't fix her. All I could do was focus on my own life, on building a future that was filled with purpose, passion, and genuine connection. The silver frame was still on my coffee table. I picked it up, examining it closely. It was beautiful, elegant, a symbol of hope and reconciliation. But it was also a reminder of the pain and heartbreak that I had endured. I made a decision. I took the frame into my bedroom and placed it on my dresser. I knew that I would never forget the past, but I also knew that I couldn't let it define me. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities, and I was ready to embrace it, with all its challenges and opportunities. I finally knew what I needed to do and how to do it. I opened my computer and went to my company's webpage. There was a job opening in our branch in another state. It would mean I would move far away from my family. I sent my resume and a request for an interview, with a note stating I could be available on a week's notice if offered the position. I had a feeling I was finally ready to live a life truly independent, and for me alone. The call came sooner than I expected. It was a crisp, professional voice on the other end, confirming my resume had been reviewed and they were impressed with my experience. An interview was scheduled for the following week via video conference. Panic threatened to set in. Moving across state lines, leaving everything I knew, was a terrifying prospect. But the thought of staying, mired in the same familial patterns and emotional baggage, was even more so. I prepped relentlessly, researching the new market, anticipating their questions, rehearsing my answers until they sounded natural and confident. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a simple but elegant blouse that projected competence without being too flashy. The day of the interview dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the anxiety swirling inside me. Peanut, sensing my tension, stayed close, nudging my hand with her wet nose for reassurance. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and logged into the video conference. The interview panel consisted of 3 people, all of whom seemed sharp and engaged. The questions were challenging, probing my experience, my leadership skills, and my ability to adapt to new environments. I answered honestly and with enthusiasm, highlighting my successes, acknowledging my failures, and emphasizing my eagerness to learn and grow. As the interview drew to a close, the lead interviewer leaned forward, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Tamara, we're very impressed with your qualifications and your enthusiasm. We think you would be a great asset to our team. We'd like to offer you the position of Senior Account Manager, effective in 2 weeks." My heart skipped a beat. 2 weeks. That was it. A life-altering decision hanging in the balance. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm thrilled to receive this offer. May I have a day to consider it?" "Of course," she replied. "We understand this is a big decision. We look forward to hearing from you soon." I ended the call, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and terror. The leap of faith I had been contemplating was now a tangible reality. Did I have the courage to take it? I spent the rest of the day pacing my apartment, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, the new job offered a significant career advancement, a chance to challenge myself and expand my horizons. It was a clean break from the past, a fresh start in a new city, a place where I could define myself on my own terms. On the other hand, leaving meant severing ties with my family, abandoning the fragile peace we had begun to build. It meant leaving behind the friends I had made, the familiar comfort of my surroundings, the safety net of my established life. As darkness fell, I found myself drawn to the window, staring out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. I thought of Dad, of Mom, of Emily. I thought of the silver frame on my dresser, a symbol of both pain and hope. I realized that I couldn't let the fear of the unknown hold me back. I had to trust myself, to believe in my abilities, to take a chance on a better future. I also knew that moving was not forever, and I could come visit them if I wanted. I took a deep breath, reached for my phone, and dialed the number of the lead interviewer. "I accept the offer," I said, my voice firm and resolute. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I gave notice at my current job, found a new apartment in the new city, packed my belongings, and said my goodbyes. Saying goodbye to Sarah was especially difficult. She had been more than just a boss to me. She had been a mentor, a friend, and a source of unwavering support. I thanked her for her guidance, for her belief in my abilities, and for helping me to become the person I am today. She hugged me tightly, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so proud of you, Tamara," she said. "You're going to do great things. Don't forget me when you're famous." Saying goodbye to my friends was equally challenging. We promised to stay in touch, to visit each other whenever possible, to maintain the bonds that had sustained us through so many ups and downs. But the most difficult goodbye of all was to my parents. I waited until the last possible moment, wanting to delay the inevitable. I knew that this was going to be hard on them, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to face their disappointment. I drove to their house on the evening before my departure, my heart pounding in my chest. I found them waiting for me on the porch, their faces etched with sadness. "We heard about the job," Dad said, his voice quiet. "Congratulations, Tamara. We're proud of you." "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the chirping of crickets in the garden. "We understand why you're doing this," Mom said, her voice filled with understanding. "You need to spread your wings, to find your own way. We won't hold you back." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I'm going to miss you," I said, my voice breaking. "We're going to miss you too," Dad said, reaching for my hand. We hugged tightly, the unspoken words hanging in the air between us. I knew that this wasn't a permanent goodbye. I would come back to visit, to stay in touch, to continue to rebuild our relationship. But it was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in my life. As I drove away from their house that night, I looked in the rearview mirror, watching as their figures receded into the darkness. A wave of sadness washed over me, but it was also mixed with a sense of excitement, of anticipation, of hope. I was on my way to a new life, a new beginning, a new version of myself. The new city was everything I had hoped for and more. It was vibrant, diverse, and full of energy. The people were friendly and welcoming, and the opportunities seemed endless. My new apartment was small but cozy, with a stunning view of the city skyline. I quickly settled in, decorating the space with my belongings, creating a sanctuary that felt like home. My new job was challenging but rewarding. I was surrounded by talented and ambitious colleagues, and I was given the opportunity to work on exciting and innovative projects. I quickly proved myself to be a valuable asset to the team, earning the respect and admiration of my peers. But the best part of my new life was the freedom to make my own decisions, to follow my own path, to define myself on my own terms. I joined a hiking club, took a pottery class, and started volunteering at a local animal shelter. I met new people, made new friends, and discovered new passions. For the first time in my life, I felt truly independent, truly in control of my destiny. A few months after my move, I received a phone call from Mom. Her voice was brighter than I had heard it in a long time. "Tamara, I have some news," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Emily is pregnant again." My heart sank. "Not again." "But this time it's different," Mom quickly added. "She and Jason are actually excited about it. They're both working full-time jobs, they're saving money, and they're planning to get married before the baby is born." I was stunned. "Really?" "Yes," Mom said, her voice filled with hope. "It seems like she's finally growing up. She's taking responsibility for her life, and she's determined to make things work." I was skeptical, but I also wanted to believe her. Maybe, just maybe, Emily had finally turned a corner. A few weeks later, I received an invitation to Emily's wedding. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should go. But then I thought of Dad, of Mom, of the fragile peace we had begun to build. IRSVPD, yes. The wedding was a much smaller and more intimate affair than the first one. Emily looked beautiful in a simple but elegant dress, and Jason looked genuinely happy. During the reception, Emily approached me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for coming, Tamara," she said. "It means a lot to me." "Of course," I said, smiling warmly. "I'm happy for you." We talked for a while, about her plans for the future, about her hopes and dreams for her family. She seemed genuinely remorseful for her past behavior, and she expressed a sincere desire to make amends. As I watched her interact with Jason and her son, I realized that she had truly changed. She was no longer the spoiled, entitled teenager I had known. She had become a responsible, loving mother and wife. The road ahead would still be challenging, but I had faith that she could make it work. She finally realized what my parents had tried to instill in her many years ago. She could do anything if she was willing to work for it. As the evening drew to a close, I hugged Emily tightly, my heart filled with hope and forgiveness. The past was still there, a part of our history, but it no longer defined our future. I knew that we would always have our differences, but we were family, and we were determined to make it work. And as I drove home that night, I realized that I had finally found peace. I had forgiven my family, and I had forgiven myself. I had learned that life is a journey, not a destination, and that the most important thing is to keep moving forward, to keep growing, to keep learning, and to never give up on hope. I was no longer the disowned daughter, the family outcast. I was a woman who had found her own way, who had built her own life, who had learned to love and forgive. I was home. Years passed. The new city became my home. I thrived in my career, exceeding even my own ambitious expectations. I bought a charming house with a sprawling garden, a haven for Peanut, who, despite her initial anxieties, blossomed into a confident, mischievous companion. I fostered a vibrant social life, surrounding myself with friends who cherished me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. My relationship with my parents continued to heal and strengthen. Regular phone calls turned into biannual visits, and then annual holiday gatherings at my new home. They marveled at my success, at the life I had built, and they never stopped expressing their gratitude for my forgiveness. They too had learned valuable lessons. They finally understood that love meant supporting independence, not stifling it. Emily and Jason flourished as well. They tackled their challenges with grit and determination, building a stable and loving home for their children. Emily even started her own small business, selling handmade crafts online. She was a natural, and her business quickly took off, giving her a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had been missing from her life. Our family had become something new, something stronger, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the bonds of forgiveness. One sunny afternoon, I was cleaning out my attic when I stumbled upon a box labeled Memories. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. Inside were photos, letters, trinkets, relics of my past. As I sifted through the contents, my fingers brushed against something cool and smooth. I pulled it out. It was the silver frame, the one my parents had sent, the one that had sat on my coffee table, a symbol of pain and hope. I held it in my hands, gazing at it. The silver was tarnished, dulled by time, but the frame was still beautiful, elegant. I remembered the day I had admired it in the store, years ago, longing for something so seemingly simple but unattainable. I thought of the journey I had taken since then, the challenges I had overcome, the lessons I had learned. I thought of the anger, the resentment, the heartbreak, and the eventual forgiveness. A wave of emotion washed over me, a mixture of sadness, gratitude, and profound peace. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached my eyes. I knew what I needed to do. I carefully cleaned the frame, polishing the silver until it gleamed like new. Then I found a photo, a recent snapshot of my entire family, smiling, laughing, united. I carefully placed it in the frame, and then found a place of honor on my mantelpiece, above the fireplace, alongside photos of my friends, my pets, and my adventures. It wasn't a reminder of pain anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, of forgiveness, of the enduring power of family. It was a testament to the fact that even the most broken things can be mended, that even the deepest wounds can heal. I looked at the photo, at the faces of the people I loved, and my heart swelled with gratitude. I had found my own way, I had built my own life, and I had learned to love and forgive. I was home, and I was whole, and I would be forever thankful for the bumpy journey that brought me to such a place.